what I was playing, Lane?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
I'm sorry for that, for your sake. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I play with wonderful expression. As far as the piano is concerned, sentiment is my forte. I keep science for life.
Yes, sir.
And speaking of the science of life, have you got those cucumber sandwiches cut with Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
By the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord Shawman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and 1 pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is seldom of first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I've had very little experience with it myself. I have only been married once. That was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
I don't know that I'm much interested in your family life, lady.
No, sir. It is not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That will do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, if the law orders can't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
My dear Ernest, what brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else would bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth did you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. The Shropshire is your county, is it not?
Oh, Shropshire, yes, of course. Hello. Why these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who's coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well. But I don't think that Aunt Augusta will quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is positively disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I'm in love with Gwendolyn. I came to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you said you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
There is nothing romantic in a proposal. It is very romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic in a definite proposal. While one may be accepted, one usually is, I believe, then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If ever I get married, I'll certainly try to forget the fact.
I have no doubt about that, dear Algy. The divorce courts were specially invented for people whose memories are so curiously constituted.
Oh, there is no use speculating on that subject. Divorces are made in heaven. Jack, please don't touch those cucumber sandwiches. Those are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is, too.
Well, you need not eat as if you're going to eat at all. You behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever shall be.
What on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That's nonsense.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary number of bachelors that one sees all over the place. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear boy, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, You shall have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean, Algy? What do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Lane, bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
You mean to say that you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you would have let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. It's very nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I have more than usually hard up.
No use in offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, I find it makes no matter. For now that I look at the inscription inside, I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Well, of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And you have no right whatsoever to read what's written inside. It's a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it is absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't. More than half of modern culture depends on what one shouldn't read.
I am perfectly aware of the fact. I do not intend on discussing modern culture. It isn't the sort of thing one talks of in private. I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this is not your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my, aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes. Perfectly charming old lady she is, too. Lives at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy!
But why does she call herself Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From little Cecily with her fondest love.
Dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. Surely that is something an aunt should be allowed to decide for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case!
Yes, but why does she call you her uncle? From little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Earnest.
It's not Ernest, it's Jack.
You've always told me it was Earnest. You answer to the name of Earnest. I have introduced you to everyone as Earnest. You look as if your name was Earnest. You're the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my whole life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Earnest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany. I'll keep this as proof that your name is Earnest, if ever you should attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
All right, well, my name is Earnest in town and Jack in the country. And that cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that still does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. Come, old boy, you'd much better have the whole thing out at once.
Dear Algy, you talk exactly as if you were a dentist. It's very vulgar to talk like a dentist when one isn't a dentist. It produces a false impression.
Well, that is exactly... Well, that is exactly what dentists always do. Now, come, old boy, have the whole thing out at once. I may mention that I have always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and I am quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I shall tell you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you're kind enough to inform me while you are Ernest in town and Jack in the country.
Produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce an explanation and pray make it improbable.
Dear fellow, there is nothing improbable about my... There's nothing improbable about my explanation at all. In fact, it's perfectly ordinary. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew, the man who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me, in his will, guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle out of motives of respect, which you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in the country under the charge of her admiral governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You're not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
I suspected that, my dear fellow. I have lumbered all of Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Oh, well, gee. I don't know whether or not you'll be able to understand my real motives. You're hardly serious enough. Well, you see, when one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. It's one's duty to do so. And as a high moral tone cannot be said to conduce much to either one's health or one's happiness, I have always pretended to have a younger brother named Earnest in order to get up to town. Now, Earnest lives in the Albany and gets into the most dreadful scrapes. That, my dear friend, is the whole truth. Pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. Modern life would be very tedious if it were either. Modern literature, a complete impossibility.
Now that wouldn't at all be a bad thing.
Literary criticism is not your forte, my dear fellow. Leave that to people who have not been at university, but they do it so well that they appear. What you are is a bunburyist. I was quite right in saying that you are a bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced bunburists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Earnest, in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented an invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury, in order that I might be able to go down into the country whenever I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I've actually been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
Excuse me, but I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are absurdly careless about sending out invitations. It is very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people so much as not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relation. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I am always treated as a member of the family, and sent down with either no women at all, or 2. In the third place, I know perfectly well whom she will place me next to tonight. And she will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. Indeed, it is not even decent. And that sort of thing is enormously on the increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linen in public. Besides, now that I know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, naturally I want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily has grown a little too interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of Earnest. And I highly recommend that you do the same with with your invalid friend who has the ridiculous name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever get married, which seems to me extremely problematic, you will want to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time, I think.
That's absurd. If I marry a sweet, charming girl like Gwendolyn, and she is the only girl I've seen in my life who I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. What you don't seem to realize is that in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none.
That, my dear young fellow, is the theory that the corrupt French drama has been propounding for the past 50 years.
Yes, and that the happy English home has proved in half the time.
Please, don't try to be cynical. It's perfectly easy to be cynical.
It isn't easy to be anything nowadays. There's such a lot of beastly competition about. Ah, that must be Aunt Augusta. Nobody ever rings in that Wagnerian manner except relatives or creditors. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes, so that you can have an opportunity of proposing to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you tonight at Willis's?
Oh, I suppose so. If you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It is so shallow of you.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart. Aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
You are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. It will leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon. I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolyn?
Thanks, Mama. I'm quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens! Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were no cucumbers at the market this morning, sir. I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
Thank you, Lane, that will do.
Thank you, sir.
I am greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed its color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. But thank you. Oh, I've quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I'm going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She's such a nice woman and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
Yes, well, I'm dreadfully sorry. But I am afraid that I won't be able to have the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he is accustomed to that.
Yes, well, it is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the truth of the matter is, I've just had a telegram stating that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or to die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take much notice, as far as any improvements in his ailments goes. I should be obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to be kind enough not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something that will encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has practically said whatever they had to say, which in most cases was probably not much.
Yes, well, I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise you that he'll be all right by Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, people don't listen. And if one plays bad music, people don't talk. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out, if you will kindly accompany me to the next room.
Thank you, Algernon. It's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. French songs I cannot possibly allow. People always seem to think they're improper and either look shocked, which is vulgar, or laugh, which is worse. But German sounds a thoroughly respectable language, and indeed I believe it is so. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracken's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I have ever met. Since I met you.
Yes. I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public at any rate you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love someone by the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon told me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
Really love me?
Passionately.
Gwendolyn, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But, you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, of course it is. But supposing it was something else. You mean to say you couldn't love me then?
Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, I don't really much care for the name of Earnest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Really, Gwendolyn? I think there are lots more, much nicer names. I think, Jack, for instance, a charming one.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, have been more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely. But you know that I love you, and well, you led me to believe that you were little more than indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you have not proposed to me yet. Nothing at all has been said about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity.
marry me?
Of course I will, darling. With how long you have been about it, I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
I never loved anyone in the world but you.
Yes, but many men opt to propose for practice. My brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderful blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like this, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Right! Most ridiculous.
Mama, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
Mama, I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing.
Pardon me, I'm not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit, will inform you of the fact. The engagement should come on a young girl as a surprise. Less or unless, as the case may be. It's hardly a matter she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. While I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolyn, will wait for me below in the carriage. Gwendolyn, the carriage!
Yes, Mama.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. Although I have the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
I'm 29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to marry should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm glad to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. I could did it prove a serious danger to the upper classes and probably lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 6,000 and 7,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What, between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
I do own a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I think. But I don't count on that for my real income. In fact, as far as I can make out, the poachers are the only ones who make anything out of it.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
I do own a house on Belgrave Square. It is let out, however, yearly to Lady Bloxham. I could get it back, however, at 6 months' notice at any time.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Well, she doesn't get out much. She's a lady considerably advanced in years.
Nowadays, that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number at Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could easily be altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
I'm afraid I really have none. I'm a liberal unionist.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us. Or come in the evening at any rate. And now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both my parents.
Both? That seems like carelessness. Who was your father? Evidently he was a man of some wealth. Was he born in what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
I'm afraid I really don't know, Lady Bracknell. The fact is, I said that I had lost my parents. Well, it would be nearer to the truth to say that, well, that my parents seem to have lost me. I really don't know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes. The late Mr. Thomas Cardew, a man of very kindly and charitable nature, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It's a seaside resort.
Where did the charitable gentleman who had this first-class ticket for the seaside resort find you?
In a handbag?
A handbag?
Yes. A rather large, brown leather handbag with handles to it.
In what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
The cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Cloakroom at Victoria Station?
The Brighton line.
Oh, the line is immaterial. Mr. Worthing, I confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, in a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for ordinary decencies of family life, which reminds one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, has probably indeed been used for that purpose before now, but it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for recognized position in good society.
But what do you suggest that I do? I need hardly say that I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce at any rate one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how on earth I could do that. I could produce the handbag at any time. It's in my dressing room at home. Surely that should be enough for you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it got to do with me? You can hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel? Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning, Lady Bracknell.
Oh, for heaven's sake, stop playing that God! Now,
How idiotic you are!
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I noticed the way she had. She's always refusing people. I think it most ill-natured of her.
Gwendolyn is as right as a trivet. As far as she is concerned, we're engaged. Her mother is absolutely unbearable. I never met such a gorgon. I really don't know what a gorgon is like. I'm sure Lady Bracknell is one. In any case, she is a monster without being a myth, and I don't think that's rather fair. Oh. I'm sorry, Javier. I suppose I shouldn't talk about your own aunt that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It is the only thing that makes me put up with them at all. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
That's nonsense.
It isn't.
But I'm not going to argue about it. I always want to argue about things.
Well, that is what things were originally made for.
Upon my word, if I thought that, I'd shoot myself. You don't think that, well, that Gwendolyn could become like her mother in about 150 years?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased, and quite as true as any observation in civilized life ought to be.
Oh, I'm sick to death with cleverness. Everyone is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. I wish to goodness we had some fools left.
We have.
Well, I should certainly like to meet them. What do they talk of?
The fools.
Yes.
About the clever people, of course.
What fools?
Oh, by the way, have you told Gwendolyn the truth about your being Earnest in town and Jack in the country?
The truth isn't the sort of thing one tells to a sweet, simple, refined young lady. Extraordinary ideas you have on the way to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty, and to someone else if she is paid.
That's nonsense.
It isn't. What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
By the end of the week, I'll have got rid of him. I'll say that he died in Paris of apoplexy or something. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's a sort of thing that runs in families. You would much better say a severe chill.
You are sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of the sort?
Of course it isn't.
All right, then it's settled. My poor brother Ernest is carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. And that gets rid of him.
Yes, well, I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. Won't she feel his loss a great deal?
Cecily isn't a silly romantic girl, I'm glad to say. She has a capital appetite, goes long walks, and pays absolutely no attention to her lessons.
I should rather like to see Cecily.
I shall take great care that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty ward who is only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people. I am sure that Gwendolyn and Cecily will be great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that half an hour after they've met, they'll be calling each other sister.
Yes, well, women only do that after they've called each other a lot of other names first. Now, my dear boy, we really must go and dress. We want to get a good table at Willis's. Do you know it is nearly 7?
Oh, it's always nearly 7.
Well, I'm hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what should we do after dinner? Go to the theater?
Oh, no.
Well,
I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
Oh, no. I hate talking.
We might trot round to the Empire at 10?
No. I can't stand looking at things. It's so silly.
Well, what shall we do?
Nothing. It's awfully hard work doing nothing.
However, I don't mind hard work when there's no definite object of any kind.
Miss Fairfax?
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can have this at all.
Algy, you always adopt a strictly immoral attitude towards life. You are not quite old enough to do that yet. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. A few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is fast dying out. Any influence I ever had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly do can ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear sweet Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. The simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. No town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
There is a good postal service, I suppose. It may be necessary to do something desperate. That, of course, will require serious consideration. I will communicate with you daily.
My old one.
How long do you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
Oh, you will let me show you to your carriage, won't you?
Certainly.
I will show Miss Fairfax out.
Very good, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
I shall probably not be back till Monday afternoon. You can put up all my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
I hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It seldom is, sir.
Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to keep satisfaction.
There was a sweet, charming, intellectual girl, the only girl I've ever loved in my life.
You find so amusing. Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that is all.
You don't watch yourself. Your friend Bunbury will get you into a very serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They are the only things that are never serious.
Oh, that's nonsense. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Cecily, surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Morton's duty than yours, especially at a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it to page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how much your guardian wants you to improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he was leaving for town yesterday. Indeed, he always lays stress on your German when he is leaving for town.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes I think he is so serious he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I am surprised at you. Mr. away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order that I might enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope it did not end happily. I don't like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily, and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems rather unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript unfortunately was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
But I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Oh, Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
How are we this morning, Miss Prism? You are, I trust, well.
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think a short walk with you in the park would do us so much good.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, I know that, dear Miss Prism. But I was thinking of that instead of my German lesson when the director came in.
I hope, Cecily, that you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically, of course. My metaphor was drawn from the trees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He likes to spend his Sundays on Monday. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as by all accounts that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical illusion, merely, drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
Oh, I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all. There won't might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too sensational. Even these metallic problems have their melodramatic side.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography.
Horrid German.
Miss Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station, miss. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, before the Albany, Dublin. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes. He seemed much disappointed. I did mention, however, that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He seemed most anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Ernest Worthing to come here. And you better speak to the housekeeper about a room for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm so afraid he'll look just like everyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I am sure.
You are under some strange mistake, sir. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I am not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I am wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and really being good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, well, of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, I've been very bad in my own small way.
Well, you needn't be so proud of that. Though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand you are here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
I know, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning. I have a business appointment that I am anxious to miss.
Couldn't you miss it anywhere but in London?
No, the appointment is in London.
Oh, well, I understand, of course, the importance of not keeping a business engagement if one wants to retain any sense of the beauty of life. But I think you had better wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
Your emigrating. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he did say at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, the accounts I have received of Australia and the next world are not particularly encouraging. This world is good enough for me, Cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I want you to reform me. You might make that your mission if you don't mind, Cousin Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It's rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
Thank you, I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have any appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
And there's something else?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I can't think it could be quite right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I've had a catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A woman would never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church is not messed up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear Dr. Chasuble, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But is a man not equally attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive, except to his wife.
And often I've been told, not even to her.
That depends on the intellectual sympathies of the woman. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. Oh, I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from the fruits. But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she follows to the school and back.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till tomorrow afternoon.
I have returned sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity?
My brother.
his life of pleasure?
Dead.
Your brother Ernest dead?
Quite dead.
What a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my most sincere condolences. You at least have the consolation of knowing you are always the most forgiving and generous of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had his faults, but this is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No. No, he died abroad, in Paris, in fact. I received a telegram from the manager of the Grand Hotel yesterday afternoon.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
As a man sows, so shall he reap.
Charity, dear Miss Prison, charity. None of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No. No, he seemed to have expressed a desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to a very serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction next Sunday. My sermon on the meaning of the matter can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, humiliation days, feast days. The last time I preached it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the Upper Orders. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chosbo, you mentioned something of christening. I suppose you do know how to christen, all right? I mean, you are continually christening.
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in this parish. I've often spoken to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes, of course.
Most people who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
Oh, but this isn't for any child that I'm thinking, dear Dr. No. Indeed, I am very fond of children. The fact is, I would like to be christened myself. This afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've been christened already.
Well, I don't remember anything of it.
But have you any grave doubts on the subject?
Certainly intend to have. Oh, but I don't know what you think would bother you at all, or if you think I'm too young now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and indeed the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical process.
Immersion?
Oh, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, or indeed I think advisable. All weather is so changeable. At what time would you like the ceremony performed?
I don't know. I might trot round about 5, if that would do.
Perfectly. In fact, I have two similar ceremonies at the same time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
Well, I don't really see much fun in being christened with other babies. It would be childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would only ask you not to be too bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of the most obvious kind.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am so glad to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child.
What is the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as if you had a toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother! What? Your brother Ernest. He came
got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll go tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
We have all been resigned to his loss. His sudden appearance seems to me most peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room? I don't know what it all means. I think it's absolutely absurd.
Brother John, I have come down from town to tell you that I am very sorry indeed for all the trouble that I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. He is coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often. And there must be much good in one who is kind to an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Bunbury, eh? So he's been telling about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, he told me all about poor Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
But I will not let him talk to you about Bunbury or anyone else. It's enough to drive one perfectly frantic.
Of course, I realize that the faults were all on my side, but I must say that Brother John's coldness to me is peculiarly painful. I had expected a more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is the first time that I have come here.
Uncle Jack, if you do not shake Ernest's hands, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me.
Never, never, never.
But it's the last time I ever shall.
Oh, isn't it pleasant to see so perfect a reconciliation? But I think we should leave the two brothers together.
Cecily, you will come with us.
Certainly, Miss Bishop. My little task of reconciliation is over.
You have done a beautiful action today, dear child.
We must not be premature in our judgments.
I feel very happy.
Young scoundrel! Algy, you must leave here at once. I don't allow any Bunbury here.
I placed Mr. Ernest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
Mr. Ernest's luggage, sir. I have unpacked it and placed it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a large luncheon basket.
I'm afraid that I shall only be able to stay for a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once!
Now, Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
What a fearful lie you are, Jack. I haven't been called back to town at all.
Yes, you have.
I haven't heard anyone call me.
Your duty as a gentleman calls you back.
My duty as a gentleman is never interfered with my pleasures in the smallest degree.
I can quite understand that.
Well, Cecily is a darling.
You will not talk of Miss Cardew that way. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. I think you look perfectly ridiculous in it. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It is perfectly ridiculous to be in deep mourning for a man who is actually going to be staying with you for a whole week in your house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
You are certainly not staying with me for a whole week as a guest or anything else. You have got to leave at once by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave you so long as you're in mourning. It would be very unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you should stay with me, I suppose. I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Well, will you leave if I go and change?
Yes, if you don't take too long. I've never seen anyone take so long to dress and with such little resolve.
Well, at least this is better than being always overdressed as you are.
If I am occasionally a little overdressed, I make up for it by always being immensely overeducated.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage. And your presence in my garden utterly absurd! But you have got to leave by the 4:05. Oh, and I do hope you have a pleasant journey home. This Bunburying, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I'm in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Ah, there she is.
Oh, I merely came back to water the plants. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart.
Oh, was he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part?
I'm afraid so. It's very painful parting.
It is always painful parting from one whom one has known for a very brief space of time. The absence of old friends one can endure with equanimity. But even a momentary separation from one whom one has just been introduced is almost unbearable.
Thank you.
The door cart is waiting, sir.
It can wait, Merriman. For 5 minutes.
Dismissed.
Cecily, I hope I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Earnest. In fact, if you will allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd love to read it, may I?
Oh, no. It is very simply the record of a young girl's thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. When it appears in volume form, I hope you will order a copy. But pray, Earnest, don't stop. I have reached absolute perfection. You can go on. I am quite ready for more. Oh, Ernest, don't cough. When one is dictating, one should speak fluently and not cough. Besides, I don't know how to spell a cough.
Cecily, ever since I first saw your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I have dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think that you should say that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily?
The door cart is at the door, sir.
Tell her to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed to know that you're staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care for anybody in the whole world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy, of course. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Yes, it will be 3 months on Thursday.
Yes, but how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And because that which is much talked about is always very attractive, I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. And when was the engagement actually settled?
On February the 14th. Worn out by your entire ignorance of my existence, I decided to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you. The next day, I bought this ring in your name. And here is the little bangle with the true lover's knot, which I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Oh, yes. You've wonderfully good taste, Ernest.
But my own sweet Cecily, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I know only full well that I had to write your letters for you. I always wrote 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
I couldn't possibly. They would make me far too conceited. The 3 you wrote me after I broke off the engagement are so beautiful and so badly spelled that even now I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Yes, but do you mean to say that our engagement was ever broken off?
Of course it was. On March the 22nd. You can see the entry if you'd like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Yes. Why did you break it off? What had I done? I had done nothing at all. Cecily, I am very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
It would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once. But don't worry, Ernest. I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
I hope your hair grows naturally. Does it?
Yes, with a little help from others.
I'm so glad.
Cecily, you'll never break off our engagement again.
I don't think I could break it off now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name which inspires absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Ernest.
Yes, but do you mean to say that if I had some other name you could not love me?
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
I don't like the name of Algernon.
But my own dear, sweet, loving little John, I really can't see why you shouldn't like the name of Algernon. It is not at all a bad name. In fact, it is rather an aristocratic name. Half of the chaps who get into the bankruptcy court are called Algernon. But seriously, Cecily, if my name were Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I fear I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
Yes. Well, I must leave at once on the most important christening. I mean the most important business. I shan't be away more than half an hour.
Considering that we have just met today for the first time, and that we have been engaged for the last 3 months, I think it is very hard of you to ask yourself to be absent from me for so long a period as half an hour. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I was entering his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. Our most important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
No, miss. Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray, ask the lady to come here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are involved with Uncle Jack's philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like women who are involved in philanthropic work. They're so very forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How kind of you to like me so much, after we have known each other such a comparatively short amount of time. Won't you sit down?
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be a favorable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
No, I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I'm glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man, and once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate. And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So would you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolyn. I am very fond of being looked at.
Your mother, no doubt, or some other female relative of advanced years resides here also?
Oh, no, I have no mother, no, in fact, any relations. My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange he never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How very secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that this news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. Cecily, I am very fond of you. I have liked you ever since I met you. But now that I know that you're Mr. Worthing's ward, I am bound to state that I am not quite so sure I like it. I wish that you were, well, a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Pray do. I believe that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well, Cecily, to speak with perfect candor, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honor. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, provides us with many most painful examples of what I refer to. If it were not so, history indeed would be quite unreadable.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn, but did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Oh, Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for quite some time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if a cloud had come across a friendship such as ours. But you are quite travel anywhere without my diary. One must always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid that I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can say, dearest Gwendolyn, if it would cause you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I will consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten himself into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me as an entanglement, Miss Cardew? You are presumptuous. In a moment like this, it becomes more than one's moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I say a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I lay tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Oh yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills, quite close, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that is why you live in town.
Quite a well-kept garden you have here, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anyone manages to exist in the country. If anyone who is anyone does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, that is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering quite greatly from it just at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I am told. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea. Sugar? No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable these days.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, thank you. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays.
And that's Miss Fairfax?
You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature, but I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my dear sweet, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I will not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I thought that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It occurs to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to be made in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest!
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask you one thing? Are you engaged to this young lady?
Dear little Cecily, of course not. What was a silly idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you, you may.
I knew there must have been some error. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack! Oh!
Here is Ernest.
My own.
A moment, Ernest. I must
heavens, Gwendolyn!
Yes, to good heavens, I mean, to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. One could put such an idea into a pretty little head.
Thank you. You may.
I was afraid there was some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now embracing you is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh!
Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. Deny anything if I liked. But my name certainly is John. It's been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us.
My poor wounded Cecily.
My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
Sister, won't you?
There is just one question I should like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there's just one question I would like to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest. It is a matter of some importance for us to know where he is at the present.
Gwendolyn? Cecily? It's very painful for me to speak the truth. First time in my life I've ever been reduced to such a painful position. I'm really rather inexperienced in anything of the sort. But I will tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Ernest. I have no brother at all. I never had a brother, and I certainly don't intend on having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Not a brother of any kind?
No, not of any kind.
I am afraid, darling Cecily, that neither of us is engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
Let us go into the house. They will hardly venture to come after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose.
Yes, a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I have ever had in my entire life.
You have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has a right to Bunbury wherever one chooses. Every serious Bunburyist knows that.
Serious Bunburyist? Oh, good heaven.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What on earth you are serious about, I haven't got the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy, you have such an absolutely trivial nature.
The only satisfaction I get out of the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country quite so often as you used to, dear Algy. And a good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off color, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to run to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing, either.
Well, as far as your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I think that you're taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to mention nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defense at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be married to Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There's no chance of your ever marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united.
That's no business of yours.
Well, if it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, then merely at dinner parties.
wonder in the whole of this wretched business I can't make out. Perfectly, perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cups. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them.
I see it's harmless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately would tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. Right now, I'm eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins.
There's no right for you to eat them in such a greedy manner.
Yes, but Jack, you've just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was heartless you're eating muffins under the circumstances. That's quite another thing.
Yes, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go anywhere without my dinner. Nobody ever does, except for vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest.
My dear young fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble this morning to be christened at 5:30. And naturally, I would take the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. Not both be christened Earnest, it would be absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There's no evidence showing that I've ever been christened by anyone. I should think it highly likely that I haven't. And so does Dr. Chasuble. Now you, on the other hand, have been christened.
Yes, but I have not been christened for years.
But you have been christened. That's the important thing.
Yes, so I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it very dangerous you're venturing upon it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill.
Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill is not hereditary.
It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things.
It's nonsense.
Jack, you're at the muffins again. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
But I hate tea cake.
Then why on earth do you allow it to be served up to your guests? What ideas you have of hospitality?
Algy, I have already asked you to leave. I don't want you here! Why don't you leave?
I haven't finished my tea yet. And besides, I still have one muffin left.